through board games, and tonight we're here with Patrick. Patrick is the publisher of a game that's coming to Kickstarter called Trove, and Trove is an asymmetrical dungeon delve in which players will take on different roles. So the format here is I'm going to be asking Patrick a series of questions, and he'll help us delve into the dive of this game, so to speak. So let's get started without further ado. Patrick, you found a designer that designed something similar to something you were envisioning. So what attracted you to David's design here for this game?
Sure. So what I was working on before I took a look at Trove and decided to make an offer on it. I was working on a game where the players would lay tiles down to make a dungeon, and then you would get awarded points every scoring interval for having monsters in play, and you would also be able to move a character around to kill the other player's monsters to try and clean up the board a little bit. So the game was more wasn't asymmetrical like David's was. So when I first saw David's, I was really impressed with how well designed it was graphically, how well the pieces moved in a very chess-like fashion. So you'd move something, and the other player would be forced to do something, and then you'd do something, and so on. So that's what really drew me in about it.
Okay, so it sounds like it was a highly interactive game, and that does sound appealing. So what type of games do you regularly enjoy? Are they similar to David's design, or?
I don't think there's a whole lot similar to David's design. So I do enjoy games with an asymmetrical character to it. So like I think of Illuminati when I think of that, which is pretty old, so maybe you don't catch the reference. But all the Illuminati start out a little bit different and grow in different directions because they have different victory conditions. So I generally like to play. I like to play heavy Euros. I like to play long narrative games. I have a soft spot for Eldritch Horror, I believe is the name of the game. So, which is kind of a guilty pleasure, since there isn't a ton of game there, but there's a lot of narrative there. So I like that about it. Yeah, I've always been attracted to things that are asymmetrical, particularly when the characters or the roles or whatever fit together in a way that makes you think about how you and the other player will interact with the game differently, and how those work together. So, yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned that you like playing longer games.
Yeah.
Is that something that transfers over to this design, or do you feel?
Oh no. So best case scenario, I've seen 60-minute games. I've typically, I think 75 to 90 minutes is about where we come in, which is, I think, a great length for me. That's right on the money for me. We can play 2 games in the evening if we want to, or we can play 1 game, and that'll be the evening. Recently, I was playing at a convention, and we had something happened, and we had a 3-hour game, and everyone got a little grumpy by the end. So I don't want that to happen again. I know it happened. We were playtesting some new material, and it just didn't work out. So that won't be in the final release.
Okay. Well, so the basic version of the game plays in like an hour, 90 minutes, and it does sound like an ideal length. I like that. Length fairly well myself.
And then I think for one of the stretch goals, what I would like to do, if we do a Kickstarter campaign, which is looking like we are, I would like to add difficulty levels, kind of like how Doom or Quake had difficulty levels, so you could choose from 5 difficulty levels per roll. And if everybody chooses the lowest roll, then it would just be a shorter game. So like maybe an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. So.
Okay. Well, that sounds like it would scale very well if you're going to have different difficulties for each role. If somebody's a more experienced gamer, then they could come in and have a harder time. Whereas if somebody's new to the table, you could scale it down for them. And I like that idea as a balancing mechanic.
Yeah. I do try. When I play with new players, I do try and spot them, whatever that advantage would be for the role I'm in. So that happens, and then what works really well about the game though is even if I don't put those levels in, I think once you're playing the 4-player game, the cave has such a strong role in keeping the other players in check that I think even if there is an imbalance just because of randomness or because of the situation of the game, if the cave is the more experienced player, they can fix a lot of the balance very quickly. So
Okay. So
and that's what they have to do to win.
sounds good. So could you give us a brief rundown of the 4 roles really quick, just so people have a sense of them?
Sure, yeah. So Trove is a cave crawler or a dungeon crawler. The players are the players are creating a board made out of tiles as they explore the map, and the tiles then will show various chambers in the cave and in which direction the player can walk. The first role, if there's one player in the game, which there should be, they play as the knight, and she is there to kill the dragon. The dragon may or may not be a player in the game. So she'll explore the cave. She interacts the most with the board. So like the things on the board interact with her and she interacts with them a lot. She moves around by using kind of an action point system where she puts points into her movement or her strength or her other abilities. And those allow her to do other things like walk through the wall, interact with more board tiles, attack the dragon, shoot a bow, things like that. And as she explores, she'll become more powerful by completing side quests that she has, or by finding treasures. She can keep the treasure, or she can turn it in for another token, or what's the? I'm blanking on the third way here. That's it. Those are the ways you gain hero tokens. The second player is the goblins, and the goblins are trying to defend the cave from the knight. And so they run around in 3 tribes. There's the Claw tribe, which fights a little bit stronger than the other 2 tribes. There's the Bone tribe, which gets monsters. And there is the third tribe is the Eye tribe, which gains secrets for the goblin player. And those are cards that go into the goblin player's hand and give them extra little powers on their turn that they can play anytime. Like they can walk through the light without taking damage, or they can firebomb the knight or whatever. The goblins then have to play a little push your luck game every turn to muster more guys into their tribes. And then they can put the tribes on the board and the tribes will grow stronger. They have to risk having the tribes on the board. And then once they grow strong enough, they can attack the knight. And if they do 7 hits to the knight, they win the game. If there's a third player, they can either play as the dragon or the cave. And yes? Okay. Okay, no problem. They can either play as the dragon or the cave. The dragon, if they play the dragon, then the knight is no longer looking for the sleeping dragon on the board. They're looking for the actual player that's playing the dragon. The dragon gets power cards every turn that they can spend on doing various powers on their sheet. The most basic of which is they move, or they can attack the goblins, or he can peer. He can look, or he can light the tiles up around him. And so when a tile comes into play, it's dark on its face down, and then when it gets explored, you flip it over to show what's on the other side. So the dragon can explore tiles very quickly. So the dragon then is trying to wake up, so it's moving sloth cubes out of its sloth area and moving them into like what we call the wakefulness track right now. And as the dragon wakes up, the dragon becomes more powerful and can do more things on each turn. The final player then is the cave, and the caves in the game, they take over playing all events and playing all the tiles for the other players. So if the other players make the board expand, the cave will place the tiles that make the board expand. And the cave also gets other powers based on how many treasures are in play and how many crystals have been flipped up, which are one of the tiles. And the cave's goal is to get all of the tiles into play. And then once the tiles are on play, the cave starts collapsing the cave by removing tiles from the board until 5 crystals are destroyed and the whole cave comes down on everybody. So the cave's job is to kind of be the spoiler for everybody, since they're kind of the timer. Like the longer the game goes, the more likely they are to win. So all their powers are oriented around preventing the other players from fighting, slowing the other players down, and weakening the other players without killing them.
All right. Well, that sounds like a good overview of the game. I think it's fun that the goblins have surprises for the knight and that they can play cards out that the knight may not know about. So it sounds like the sides are fairly well balanced from what you're describing, but what have some of your play testers given you as feedback, and how has that helped you improve on the game here?
Sure. So when I first received the design, the knight would grow, and it was a really cool system. The knight would you'd play cards, and the cards would go. They'd assemble into like a sentence about the knight. So it'd be like the knight, daring, and brave, and each of those words had a power associated with it. And so then as the knight took damage, it was a he back then, those cards would flip over, and the abilities of the knight would change, like as the knight got weaker and then when he healed, he'd get stronger again. That system is great, but I liked that way to describe the knight, but the problem with it was that once the goblins kind of got the ball rolling as far as wounding the sorry, a cat's about to run by. Hey, buddy. All right. So the knight would like once the goblins kind of got a toehold in bringing the knight down, it just got easier and easier and easier for them to bring the knight down. So it was kind of a rich getting richer problem. So that was feedback right away, as we kind of had to disconnect the knight's health from the knight's ability, and so the goblins would always be attacking the knight's health, and all the other players would always be altering the knight's ability. So that was important right away. And then the goblins would draw tokens out of a bag to show how many goblins they got each turn, and as players killed goblins, they would take them and collect them as gold. And we had a lot of problems with the goblins running out of pieces, basically. And so you would have a lot of goblin turns where the goblins would just kind of hang out and draw a bunch of pieces and play a bunch of cards, and then not really get to do anything, and then say their turn was done. And those could take between 3 and 5 minutes a turn, and so it was a little disruptive. So that was some pretty solid feedback we got right away. Since we released. Back in May, I released a new print and play set to the internet, and we've been getting just a lot of great feedback from the fans. I don't know if you looked at the thread on Board Game Geek. It's now like 20 pages long. It's massive, and I'm guilty. I've put a lot of long posts on there too, but I think it's good. Yeah. So they've been. I think there's been a lot of like, this is how you're going to polish this. There's been a lot of discussion about, like, this card is okay, but it needs to be more interactive. Like, how can we make that more interactive? And I've been asking a lot of those questions too. What can we do to make this card more interactive? The community's been great, and that was one of the things that attracted me to the design right away when I saw it. I was like, this is a no-brainer, because there's so many people that are interested in this game already. It's going to be really easy to sell, and I'm very excited about that part of it. So we've been getting a lot of good feedback from them. There's been some suggestions on how to make the dragon more playable. I went through maybe 6 iterations of the dragon while I was testing, and a lot of tweaks to the cave's little powers, the omens, the cave's omens is what they're called. So.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. Yeah, when I heard about the concept too, I got immediately enthusiastic about it. This is such a cool idea to me, to be able to play as all these different characters and even the cave itself. So I can pick up on their enthusiasm pretty easily, and
yeah.
I like that it's generated that community around it. That seems like a big plus, especially if you go the Kickstarter route.
Yeah. I'm a little sad that I think the 2-player game kind of fell by the wayside while we were testing, and I would like to say to the community that I plan on, like, once the Kickstarter is over, I plan on buckling down and just playing 2-player games until I get that right. It was working pretty well, and I did a lot of testing with 2-player when I first started. But then as we added pieces back on, I think it's a pretty rough game for the night right now. So, and I have some ideas on how to fix that.
Okay. So you mentioned the number of players. Is there a sweet spot for your game? Because I've heard you were throwing around maybe adding a 5th or 6th role.
Yeah, right. I think 4 is definitely the strongest way to play, without a doubt. The 3-player game has this pretty elegant kind of rock, paper, scissors aspect to it. If you're playing Knight, Goblin, Dragon, there is a variant to play Knight, Goblin, Cave in the rules right now, and that's also kind of fun for me. I kind of like the cave has a little bit faster game then, so it's kind of challenging to see if you can get through it in time. Yeah, I think we have been talking about adding 5 players, but I think for the health of the campaign, we're gonna have to push the 5th player roles back into like an expansion or something like that, because that'll give me time to focus on the core balancing and the core design, and then putting those 5th player roles back into an expansion will give me more time to test them. So we've also I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to jump in really quick and say that I admire that as a person coming from a backer's perspective, because a lot of times I feel like designers are trying to add on a lot of exciting stuff, but it may or may not have been tested or balanced.
Right.
And I just wonder if they're running ahead of themselves with the enthusiasm of the community. So I do admire you guys for having that sort of foresight to be able to pause and say, well, yeah, this is awesome, but we have room to grow in the future. So.
Right. Yeah. And then the other concept that we had too was to add on like to the project is to have like an alternate to the characters. So maybe there would be an elf knight, and the elf knight would play a little bit differently, but wouldn't require a ton of testing because it's still the knight's concept. It just plays a little different. We'll see how that tests. If it looks too complicated to test, once again, I'll just set it by the wayside and wait till later. So, and maybe just print that as a free thing later. So, yeah. So I like the times we have played the 5-player game and it's working. I really like it. I like the extra interaction's been very interesting, but yeah, it's going to be a bear to test. So we'll wait. Okay. 4 is the sweet spot to answer your question.
Fair enough. So. Then let me see, where were we here? So you mentioned in your other interview that I watched about how you wanted everybody to have a sense of how all the roles would work together. And seeing as 4 players is this sweet spot, I was wondering, are you going to have like a cheat sheet for everybody to look at so they have a sense of how the roles work, or what's your plan for being able to make sure everybody has a concept of the asymmetrical roles here?
Yeah, and in fact, I better get that ready before Gen Con, which is in like 2 weeks. Because one of the challenges to me as the publisher and as the designer is I've done a lot of public testing lately, and I've done a lot of public plays, and it's been a challenge to sit down with people of different skill level as far as the hobby gaming, as a field goes. I've played with some people who have like, oh, I've played a few games of Settlers, to people like me who have played everything. And that's been a challenge. Like sometimes I'm like, wow, I'm 20 minutes explaining this, and that's kind of rough. So I'm hoping I can pull together a little help from the community, and I've been kind of tinkering around with it myself. But what I think is going to have to happen is the sheet that the character's interface comes on, you'll flip it over, and then on the other side there'll be like a 4-quadrant, like, this is the quick explanation of each role, and how they and how to play them in the game. And then the other thing I think I'll be doing for Gen Con is I will probably just stack the deck and show everybody how to play the first turn, and just kind of do a typical first turn, because not a lot happens on the first turn anyway. It just kind of gets everything going, and then say like, okay, now it's the second turn, let me help you through your turn. So that kind of thing. Instead of explaining it in too much detail, just explain as we play. So. Yeah,
I think that's a good approach. I teach board games at my local game store, and I have so much going on right away that it's good to ease people into that. So that sounds reasonable, and yeah, I like the idea of having the crib sheet on the back so people can look at it. Are there going to be tokens on the front side?
Unfortunately. So that maybe I'll have to make another page. What I'd like to do for Gen Con is have just a flyer, and then on the back side is the cheat sheet, and then when you're done demoing, you can just take it, and then you'll be able to look at the rules later if you want to. So maybe I'll just have to print 4 more sheets and put them in the rules, or have it on the back of the rules or something. Yeah.
A lot of people can supply it through Board Game Geek or something if you just go to the page or something and say, here's a link to our crib sheet if you need one. So that might be an expedient way to do it too.
Right. So, and you know, of course, I think it's a good hobby game because I think once you've played it a few times, you want to play all the roles, and then once you played all the roles, suddenly there's this new game starts to emerge for you where you start to understand the impact that your role has on all the other characters and how you have to play aggressively sometimes, and how you have to allow people to do things that is counter to your to your survival even. For instance, the dragon. If the dragon's getting too many treasures, the knight's not getting treasures, and if the knight's not getting treasures, they're not getting stronger, and that might mean that the goblins will kill the knight, and so the dragon has to allow the knight to get a few treasures and protect the knight a little bit, even though the knight's coming after the dragon. So there's definitely some like places where you have to play softly to allow the other player to catch up with you, even though it's dangerous to you. So that's really appealing about the design. Unfortunately, getting back to explaining the game though, you know, it kind of misses that. You know, like I can explain Ticket to Ride in a few sentences because it's, you know, you either take tickets or you put trains down, and then we'll talk about the actual like routes later. You know, we won't worry about that the first couple turns, and so it kind of misses that. So I'll have to figure out how I'm going to deal with that still.
All right. Well, so about how far along do you feel the project is overall? I know people, if they're bringing a game to Kickstarter, bring it at various stages of development.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I know what you're saying. I'm sorry, I cut you off. I think we have about half the art left to go, and I'm feeling pretty comfortable that it's going to be done. I know that Kyle Farron, who's the artist, he's planning on doing one more push before we go to Kickstarter to get as much as he can done. But I feel like what's there is a really good representation of what the final product's going to look like. So I'm not too worried about that. I think like we could keep testing it for a long time and keep refining it, and I don't think we're at a bad point to stop. I think it would be like with just a little bit more polish, I think we'd be okay to stop right now. I've presented some ideas on how to make the roles more interactive to the Board Game Geek group, and I said I'm not going to work on these because while it's being play tested and while it's being shown to reviewers, I don't want to be changing the game still because it's too frustrating to have to deal with, well, you need this version, no, you need this version. So I said I'm not going to touch the design. I've been changing cards a little bit, but not changing anything major about the design for the past few months. And so I think what my plan would be, what my hope would be, is after the Kickstarter, we would just do one more round of play testing with that material, decide which way we're going to go, and then send it to the printer. So, and we're getting some great feedback from some of the groups about what's working and what's not. So I think we'll have a great. I think it'll be a great game. And I think like what we have to go to Kickstarter with today is fine. Like I think we could get it back today.
Yeah, well, I'm excited for it, so that sounds cool to me. But,
yeah.
Yeah, and I know some games too. I used to play Thunderstone, which is sort of a deck building dungeon delve, and they had an iterative thing. There was like Thunderstone and then Thunderstone Advance when they streamlined the rules even more. So I think as long as you've got the basic system down, you can always make advances on that. So
and build on it later. Yeah. We have not. Yeah, we've planned ahead. There's a lot more design. The problem I've been unemployed for a few months, and I'm back to work now. But like when I get into a phase where I'm just designing, I just design and design and design and design, and it's hard to shut off. And so that was why I kind of had to say, okay, enough. I need to stop working on this. And so to kind of focus my energy. Because that design energy is still there, and so to not use it inappropriately, I've been letting myself work on other, like the fifth rolls, like there's 3 fifth rolls and other things like that, so that I don't detract from the main design, but I'm still designing.
Okay. Now, as far as a backer perspective, if you're choosing Kickstarter, do you have production companies you typically work with? I know you released at least one other game in the past, so would you say you have a strong relationship with with printers, with component producers, that sort of thing?
Yeah. My last game I printed at Ludo Fact, which is in Germany, and they have a if they have some connection with China, I don't understand, but that's okay. Yeah, I have a pretty good. I learned. I was kind of mentored into this process, and I have some friends who do print buying, and so I've been able to kind of use that relationship to figure out like how to do the print buying myself. So I'm getting pretty adept at it, and I'm getting pretty good at figuring out how to price things and how to negotiate, frankly. So I've been able to talk them down in some places, and that's a great thing to be able to do. So yeah, I think that's as far as like what I bring to the producer relationship with the designer, if David's the designer in this case, is a strong sense of where to buy and how to get the materials we need to go forward. So.
Excellent. I'm sure that will make potential backers feel pretty confident in where you're going with this if you have a strong relationship with a publishing community where they can print the materials. And so I know a lot of times Kickstarter projects have this lull sort of where people will start the project and check in or pledge at a basic level just to follow along. And if you had some backers like that, I'm just kind of wondering, what would you say to try and persuade them that this is a game, or what would you show them that you feel would be sort of the knockout?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I read that and I was like, oh, and I moved on. So I would say that what I would like to do during the campaign is there's a couple platforms for playing online. Boardgames Online. I've been I keep approaching them and trying to figure them out, but I frankly just don't have the time right now. I went back to work, and so there's a lot less time in my day, and just I could spend all day just working on the game. And so I would like, if someone was able to help me get that set up, that would be great. So one thing I'd like to do during the campaign is literally just have a game every night. Just say at 9 o'clock Central Standard Time, I'm going to be in this room, wherever it is online, and people can join me. And if we get 4 people, if we get 3 people, if we get 2 people, I'll play a game, and and play for an hour and a half, and then go to bed. So I'd like to do that to kind of hopefully people could come and watch that and be like, oh yeah, let's do that. We were really aiming for starting at the end of next week, but I don't think that's practical now. And so that was my other way to combat the slump, was to just go to Gen Con and run 15, 20 games there and get people backing my direction. So yeah, so I think the best thing to convince people is honestly, there's a few other asymmetrical games. I don't think there's anything like this. It's just a really cool game when you play it. I like how all the pieces fit together, all the roles come together. You play 4 very different games, but you're still playing the same game together. And I think people are just gonna love that.
All right. Well, that sounds good to me. I think that's all I have, unless you have another little tidbit you'd like to share with everyone. Anything?
No. We did finish. Well, we're working on finishing the art for the cover was finished this week, and so we're not ready to show it yet. I'm waiting to when we have some momentum. If people want to check it out, you can. I'll provide you with the links, and you can post them at the YouTube. There are links that we've posted. People can come and download the full game anytime they want and take a look at it, and download the rules and read them. They still need a little bit more polish, but I think they're in a pretty good spot and they're pretty readable right now, so which I like. When I'm designing, I tend not to worry about readability too much, and so the rest of the group that I've been working with has really helped me get that back on track. So it's good. I've really enjoyed that, and I would like to throw out. It's been the people that I'm working with, David Somerville and Kyle Farron is the artist, and then I've been working with Alexandra Cannon, I believe is her name, and she's been doing the copy editing. They've all been fantastic, and it's been a really, really great experience working with them all, and been sharing my vision with them for what I want the game to be, and they've been really receptive to that and working with me. And of course, they say no, we have to do it this way and stuff like that. But it's been a very positive experience working with them. So I'm glad that they're here, and I think they've all added something to the process and to the game itself. So I think it's been great. And obviously, I can't thank the fans enough. It's been there's just been so much help working on the game. There's a guy on BGG, I won't call him up by name, he knows he is. He's been playing solo games 2 or 3 nights a week, which was crazy. I didn't really even think about it as a solo game, and he's been playing all either 3 or 4 roles. And this week I sent him the notes I had for 2 of the 5th roles, and he played a game with both of them. And so he had basically a 6-player game that he played solo. You can if you go into the session reports for that game, you can see them, and it's been fantastic. So.
All right. Well, we'll try and put up some of those links in the liner notes for our video, and I hope this inspires you all who are watching and gives you a good idea of the game and the crew behind it, which was really my intention, was to get you a sense of who are the people behind this and how they're dedicated to producing this game, and to give you a picture of whether this is something you would like. I think it sounds sweet. So thank you, Patrick, for being with us tonight. And
you're welcome.
You guys reached out to us, and hopefully we can talk again in the future. And yeah, have a good night.
You too.
All right, we'll sign off. See you all later.